Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Stephanie Cork. I work with the Reading and Language Arts Centers. And when parents call me, especially elementary school parents call and ask about different resources for reading and have questions about their students, they often tell me that their children have a reading comprehension problem. But what I find is, after assessing them, is about 85% of the students that come to us actually have a reading fluency problem that can affect comprehension. So when parents of middle school and high schoolers call me, I'm a little skeptical as well if they tell me that they have a reading comprehension problem, because all difficulties end up resulting typically in a reading comprehension problem. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between reading fluency and reading comprehension. Fluency is basically rate and accuracy. So in other words, if you're not reading words accurately in text, it can change the meaning of the text. So for example, we have, now I'm taking a lower level passage, we have a second grade passage that says, "The mouse ran into a hole by the tree." And I've had lots of students read it, "The moose ran into a hole by the tree." And therefore, when I ask the comprehension question, why did the mouse run into the hole, those kids look at me like, "Lady, what are you talking about?" So we often use strategies. We tell students, oh, if you don't know a word, look at the picture. If you don't know the word, skip it or try something similar and see if you can figure it out. But some of those context clues for decoding don't work at the higher level. They work real well for vocabulary, trying to figure out word meaning, but not so much for decoding. So let's take a look at this passage right here. This would be a typical, probably maybe a high school level passage, and we would ask students to go ahead, read this, and then I'm going to ask you questions about it. So what I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to take a look at this passage. The blank lines represent skipping a word, and the words in italics represent kind of guessing at a similar word in the passage. So I'm going to have you read it, and then I'm going to ask you some typical questions about the passage. Ready? Okay, is everybody ready? Had time to read the passage? What is the main idea of this passage? What happened in the 1940s?
World War II.
It did, but in relevance to this particular passage. Very difficult to figure out what it actually is talking about when you take out some of the words. So they find that if even you need to be able to read at least 90 to 90% of the words in text in order to understand it. So taking out words, skipping, guessing, things like that may not help the student. So let's talk about the context clues. Why do you think they might work better in earlier grades with younger students? Any ideas?
They have more photos.
Photos, yes, there's more pictures in there in the books of younger students. What else is different?
There's less words.
Less words in the passage, and the words in the passage are often more in their known vocabulary, so it's a little easier for them to use the context clues to figure them out. But as we saw in the previous passage, those strategies did not work for an older student, guessing and skipping. Okay, what happens when the text becomes more complex then? They don't have the strategies. The guessing and the skipping, as we said, does not work, looking at the picture clues. Okay, so how does reading fluency promote comprehension. Think back to the accuracy. Sometimes as a student isn't reading fluently, it takes them longer, there's more mental effort involved, and so their focus is more on how to read the words and not as much about what the meaning of the passage is. So reading fluency, again, if you're not reading the words accurately, it can change the meaning of the passage. So accuracy is a huge component of oral reading or reading silently. In the same regard, spelling fluency has a big impact on written expression, meaning that every time you have to stop to think about how to spell a word, it's an interruption to your thought process. And when you're trying, the whole purpose of writing is to get your thoughts across. So all of those interruptions have a major impact on your ability to write. Right? Go. So this is a typical skill sequence of a phonics-based program, starting with consonant, digraph, short vowels, long vowels. We have skills like silent E, consonant LE, vowel teams. These are common skills that a young student needs to learn, but the problem with older students is many times they haven't mastered these skills. And if we find that, like in the passage that I showed you before, if they don't have good decoding skills, it can have a major impact on their ability to understand the information. So even though many of our older middle school, high school students have difficulty in this area, what they don't really want is to be taught by an elementary reading program. They don't want, we've had 10th graders come in reading at second grade reading abilities, and they don't want a second grade reading program. So what we do to kind of make it a little more interesting and to really aid in their comprehension and their fluency is to include roots and affixes with that. And right now, Greek and Latin roots is not a popular component in reading instruction. We've kind of gotten away from it. However, it is an excellent way to teach a struggling reader, and it really is helpful for, I would say, all middle school and high school students. It really helps on ACT, SATs, any kind of standardized testing, higher level reading. So we'll talk quite a bit today about root and affixes. Before we do that, we're going to talk about some of the stages of reading. As I said, we have sometimes 10th graders coming in reading at a second grade reading ability. And we have to really understand how to remediate a student who's struggling that severely. So Dr. Jean Chall is from Harvard University. She has written many books, and she came up with the stages of reading development, which are kind of the gold standard. This is rather, I don't want to say old, but the stages came up in 1983, and there are a lot of researchers that have made slight changes to this, but this is kind of the gold standard. So the first three stages of the stages of reading development are the learning to read stages. This is typically ages 0 through to about a third grade level. The focus is on them learning to read. But typically when they get to about the fourth grade level, the focus shifts to reading to learn. They're expected to know how to do it, but now they have to use that skill to be able to get new information. So stage 3, reading to learn, typically ages 9 through 13, grades 4 through 8. You have stage 4, where they're starting to learn more about multiple viewpoints, which is typically high school level reading. And then you have college level reading, stage 5, Reconstruction Plus. So these last three stages, when we talk about middle school and high school students, we're primarily talking about these stages. But as I said, if you have a student coming in, let's say a middle school or high school student that is reading at a second grade reading ability, then we need to go back to the instruction of these earlier stages for that student. All right, so again, we need to know that the average reader moves through those stages at the grades and age shown. But instruction, again, needs to be geared towards whatever stage the student is in, no matter what grade or no matter what age they are. All right, a little background on our English language. We know that we're kind of a melting pot, and we hear people say it's very difficult to learn English. And there's definitely a reason why for that. About 30%, 33% of our words come from the Anglo-Saxon based part of our language. And that is our everyday speaking language. It is our phonics based type words, typically words in reading ages through to about a 5th grade level. So if the phonics piece is very important, and that's why you hear so much about why we need to be teaching phonics in early grades, because it is our everyday speaking language. However, there's another about 1/3 of our language which come from the Latin or the Romance language, and think literature and school textbooks. Another 1/3 comes from Greek, which is more like science-based type terminology. So if we are only teaching students phonics-based patterns, it is absolutely essential, but it's not really meeting the needs of our middle school and high school students. So adding in those Greek and Latin roots is going to be very beneficial to them. So I think this is kind of a interesting little saying. The truth is that if borrowing foreign words could destroy a language, English would be dead, borrowed from Old Norse, deceased from French, defunct from Latin, kaput from German. When it comes to borrowing, English excels from Latin, surpasses from French, and eclipses from Greek any other tongue past or present. So we have a lot of influence in our, we think the English language, but we have the Anglo-Saxon patterns, we have Greek patterns, we have Latin patterns. So it's not just enough to teach those Anglo-Saxon patterns. So what can the study of roots do to benefit our students? One, it helps them to decode larger chunks of words or more advanced terminology. It also increases their fluency, so they're able to read words, larger words, more efficiently. It also helps them to spell more efficiently, more complex words. And it definitely has a huge impact on vocabulary, and which also leads to comprehension. So all of these things are very strong positives of why root instruction really should be taught at the middle school and high school level. All right, the Oxford English Dictionary has about 615 words in it. About 30% of those are Anglo-Saxon words, and about 65% of them are Romance and Greek based. And what we find is that students, the average high school student needs to learn about 3,000 new words a year before they graduate. That's a lot. And to teach individual word vocabulary isn't going to cut it. So the fortunate thing with roots is roots, if you learn the meaning of one root, it helps you unlock the meaning to many, many words. So here's where this is from Dr. Marcia Henry, and in her perfect world, this is where instruction would lie. So we have our kindergarten and first graders primarily focusing on phonemic awareness, learning their alphabet skills and sounds. In like the first, second grade through to 3rd, they're starting to learn more of the Anglo-Saxon or phonics-based concepts. Around 4th, she recommends introducing some of the affixes, prefixes, and suffixes, compound words, things like that. And then typically beyond that in middle school and high school, transitioning to more Latin and Greek-based words. Okay, so this is kind of the continuum of where the experts say it's best to teach some of these skills. So when we're teaching a student who is struggling to read, as I said, a middle school and high school student, they don't want to learn from a 2nd grade reading program. So what we do is we start off with some roots, and then we're able to infuse some phonics instruction embedded in the root instruction. So it feels like a much more sophisticated program. So let me show you. This is the first lesson that our students learn when they start attending a remedial reading program, but one that's designed especially for middle school and high school students. So their first lesson is the word pneumona ultramicroscopic silicovolcaniconiosis. All right? So they look at that right away and they go, oh yeah, no, this is not a babyish program. Okay? So this is a word that, okay, think about it. If we were to try to read this word using phonics, we would go Is that going to be very successful, sounding the word out? No. How about even, one of the things we do is we teach students, our younger students, to divide words into syllables. Well, even then, trying to use what we call a syllabication method, they find and underline vowels, they mark them with a V, they underline them, they draw their consonants on the bridge, and they divide. Then they go on to the next. Again, that's going to be a very slow process. So, does anyone recognize any roots that are in this word? Here are the roots broken down. Much easier to read. Pneumono, ultra, microscopic, silico, volcano, coniosis, or volcano. Much easier to read when you break it down into the roots. But as you had said, pneumono means lungs or breathing. What about ultra? If something is ultra great or ultra good, it is what?
Bigger.
Yeah, it's beyond or exceeding or super. How about micro? Anyone know what that? Small, very good. Scopic, when you think of scoping and something out, you think to what? To see. Silico, as she said, is flint or quartz. We know what a volcano is, also means fire. Coni means dust, and an osis. What is it? What do you think of when you hear osis? Yeah, like a disease. Okay, so here we have the meaning of each root, and now we have the definition. A lung disease caused by inhaling dust like silicon and volcanic ash particles that are extra small and can be seen only with a microscope. How close did we get to the definition based on the meaning of the roots? Pretty close, didn't we? Yeah. It's funny that your daughter got mad. So we also have a little flyer we sometimes give out where it has 14 different roots, and you can unlock the meaning of 100,000 words out of just those 14 roots. So if we think back to our high school students need to increase their vocabulary by about 3,000 new words a year. Even just learning a few small roots is going to really help them achieve that goal. All right, so one of the things struggling readers often need are multisensory teaching techniques. You know, to me this is kind of a common sense no-brainer. When you use visual methods, auditory methods, tactile, hands-on, you're going to reach far more people. I often use the analogy when I'm training teachers. I'll say, okay, so let's say I'm teaching you all how to fix the engine of a car. And this group I'm going to give the manual. And this group I'm going to verbally tell you how to fix it. And this group I'm going to show you how to fix it. But this last group I'm going to give you the manual, I'm going to give you verbal instructions, I'm going to show you how to do it. Which group do you think is going to be more successful? Obviously that last group that has all the bells and whistles. So again, teaching in a multisensory way actually, one, makes it more interesting to the students, but it really does enhance the learning process. All right, so we know that it enhances it for all students, but it truly is critical for students who struggle to learn. So I'm going to show you a couple ways we teach the roots in a more multisensory way. Here's a little quote. It's not scientific based. It's by that person anonymous that we all know. But I think it really does have, even though it's not scientific, we remember about 20% of what we read, 30% of what we hear, 40% of what we see, 50% of what we say, 60% of what we do, and 90% of what we simultaneously see, hear, say, and do. All right, so can everyone tell me, now this is where if you didn't have index cards, you don't have to do this activity, but if you have the index cards that were on the table, you can do this activity with me. What is this a picture of? Can anyone figure this one out? It's a cell phone, okay? What is the formal name, think before even cell phones, but what is the formal name for this type of gadget? When it was first invented. What do we call it? Telephone, very good. Okay, so here we have the word telephone, okay? Now usually what I do when I'm teaching this is I'll have the students draw a phone. So again, you're talking middle school and high school students, so you're not gonna do a lot of like cutting and pasting and coloring, but I'll have them draw a phone. And then I'll say, okay, what is the formal name of a phone, which is telephone? Can anyone tell me one of the roots they see in this word? Tele is a root, and so is phon and phone, okay? So let's think of some words first. So what I would have my students do is draw a picture, and on the index card, like a flashcard, I would have them write the root tele on it. So if you'd like to, on your index card, write the root word tele on it. And then what we're going to do on the back, save a little room at the top where you're going to put the meaning of the word, but we're going to brainstorm some words that have tele in it. So can anyone think of any other words besides telephone that have the root tele in it? Television, telegram, telescope. Okay, so we might go with a lot of telecommunication, telepathy. There's a whole slew of words that have tele in it. Does anybody have any idea what they think tele might mean? Let's see, we have telephone, television.
Distance.
It does, you're very good at this. It means far. Tele means far. And phon and phone, think phonics, phoneme, it means sound. Okay, so what a telephone is a far sound. So on the back of, so what the student would then have is they'd have a flashcard that has the root tele on it. On the back they'd have a list of words that have that root in it, and then we would try to determine the meaning together. And in this case, it means far. All right, here actually in one of the books we use, we have a page that has 101 root words that have the word tele in it. Or I'm sorry, 101 words that have the root tele in it. I said that backwards. So you can see how, especially when you're getting into middle school and high school level reading, how beneficial learning some of these roots are. Especially when they get into like standardized tests or reading literature, things like that. They might not know what telecommunication means, but they know what communication is. And if they've learned the root tele, they know it means far. So therefore, telecommunication must mean communication from far away, and so on. So we keep doing this with students. Here I have a picture of, what is this? The formal name. Often students will say it's a car, and we'll say, what's the formal name? It is automobile. And again, we'll ask, which roots do we see in there? And in this case, we see auto and mobile, which the roots are mob, mav, and mot. Okay? And mobile means to move. What do we think auto might mean? Self. Very good, and you're right. So what this is it's a self-moving vehicle. Okay, so we think, very basic terms. How about this? What do we call the type of book about somebody's life written by somebody else? A biography. And those two terms get very confused. So this will be something that will help with that. So we have the word biography. And as students do these activities, they're going to learn that bio means, think of biology, the study of life. Bio means life. Okay, and graph means to write. Okay, so what a biography is it is a life write. So how about the type of book where it is written by you about you, or by the person about the person by the person? Okay, we know that is an autobiography, and to help them remember that is If they've already learned the root auto, they're going to know it means self. So an autobiography is a self-life right. So one of the things that'll do is eliminate the confusion between what a biography and an autobiography are. And again, you can tie this in, you can tie the roots into science, you can tie the roots into social studies, you can tie it into literature, even art classes and gym, medical terminology, health class. This is really going to help their reading in all other content areas. So they're learning the roots and they're learning it a little more sophisticated way. So what we need to do is show you how to tie in some of that phonics instruction. So here we have two roots, vid and vis. Let's think of some words that have vid or vis in it. Can anyone think of any? Video. Vision. Video, videography, visual. Envision. Okay. Yep, and we have a lot of words. Visit, visible, invisible, and so on. So both of these up here are short vowel sounds, vid and vis. So you can talk about the short I sound. And then we can bring in modifications of the root, vide and vise. So can anyone think of any words that have vide and vise in them? Advise. I'm sorry? Revise. I'm sorry? Provide. Very good. So here we have, let me get to the words. Okay, provide, divide, advise, revise. We can show them how when you have an E that can jump over one consonant and it leads to one vowel, it'll make the vowel long instead of being a short vowel sound. So when they're in second grade and we're teaching about the magic E, obviously we can teach it that way to young students, but that's not a very appropriate way to teach that rule to a middle school and high school student. So here's a way you can kind of infuse the roots, but still go back and teach some of those underlying basic phonics skills. We do work with students ages 3 to adult with reading problems, and one of the things, very surprisingly, as I find, is that middle school and high schoolers that struggle to read often very much confuse their short vowel sounds. Okay, so we're talking, even though they should be beyond some of this instruction, they often aren't. And we can't assume that they have just mastered those skills. So again, going back, teaching some phonics through roots is definitely a more sophisticated way. The root vid and vis means to see. All right, so one of the activities, once they've learned a couple roots and they've built some flashcards, like I have up here, okay, we can do some activities where I might say to the student, show me the roots telephone, or show me the roots that go in the word telephone. Show me the roots that go in the word autograph. Okay, and if we remember, auto means self and graph means to write, again, it makes some sense as to the meaning of that word. Then I might say to them, show me the roots that go in the word microphone. And again, your students can hold up the roots, or your child. To make it a little bit more difficult or challenging, I can say, show me the roots that mean a far sea. And the student can hold up the meaning of the roots. Then I might say, show me the roots that mean the study of life. And again, they can hold up the roots. So that's just one activity. Once you've introduced the roots, you can do to kind of help give them more practice. All right, so now I have another root I want to share with you. We have a root up here, tract. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions about words that have tract in it. Okay, so you have to guess a word. I'm going to give you a clue, and the word, again, has the root tract in it. When your attention is pulled away from something, you have become what? Distracted. When you take a number away from another number, what mathematical operation is that? Subtraction. What people sign when they agree to do something that binds them together? A contract. When something pulls together or shrinks, it might be said to do this. Contract or contraction. When the dentist pulls out a tooth, this procedure is called an extraction. This one cracked me up because I never thought about it in this terms. Something that is not pretty or pleasant to look at. Unattractive. All right, so what farm vehicle has this root right in the name? A tractor. What does a tractor do? It pulls. Good. So the root tract means to pull or draw together. I never really thought about unattractive meaning you are pulled away from them. Thought that was interesting. Okay, so again, this is another way you can teach roots. The last exercise I'm going to show you is called a word builder. So we have the root rupt. Okay, can anyone think of it? And what the student would do here is they would write like eruption. Okay, can you think of any other words that would have rupt in it? Disrupted. Corrupted. Any others? So the students can kind of have fun going on, you know, erupt to eruption, and they can play around adding, you know, affixes either before or after. Okay, so a typical root lesson for us looks something like this. We're going to start off what we call the three-part drill, and that is a cumulative review of all the roots or skills they've learned up until this point. So we do a visual aspect where you show the student the card and they'll say the meaning. So they'll look at this and they'll say tella far. We do what's called an auditory drill, which is where we say the root. I might say tella, and the student has to kind of write it on paper, or sometimes to make it more tactile, we'll use what's called a tactile tray, which has like a coarse sand or something in it, even a sandpaper, something that's tactile. And we'll ask the student, you can say tella, and the student can write T-E-L-E, tella. And that's more tied to spelling skills. The visual drill is tied to reading, auditory is tied to spelling. To make it a little harder, you can say, give me the root that means self. And the student would have to write A-U-T-O, auto, in it. From there, we can have them read from word lists that contain the roots. And again, that's all a cumulative review. It probably only takes about 5 to 10 minutes to do. And even once or twice a week would have a big impact for students. Then we teach a new root where we show them the card. We come up with a key word like telephone or biography, something like that they're familiar with. We have them do some kind of an activity, whether it be drawing the picture on the cards, or sometimes for older students I like to have a lot of visuals, show pictures, things like that, just to make it stand out a little bit more. And then we're going to dictate words and sentences that contain that root or that skill in it. And that is primarily what we do to teach sometimes even a very low-level reader to infuse more sophisticated teaching instruction. Do any of you have any questions? Mm-hmm.
What are the 14 words?
You know what, I didn't bring them with me, and you know what, truthfully, the ones that are in that 14 words would not be the first words you would actually teach to a student. The ones that are a little bit more common, like bio, auto, would be, but it's really meant to show you that unlocking one root word unlocks the meaning of many, many words. But I can get that to you if you want to give me your email address. Okay?
What's the difference between a root and like a suffix and a prefix?
Well, a root is more like, think like a base word. And what the affix, the prefix, or the suffix does is add meaning to it. So like in where you have tract, okay, that meant to pull together, but un meant the opposite of that. So they modify the root is basically what they do. Okay?
A root can be a word or a word part. It doesn't have to be.
Exactly. The difference, actually, it's called a morpheme, and a morpheme is the smallest unit of language that carries meaning. So even like an S, by itself it doesn't have meaning, but if you add it to the end of the word cats, now what does it mean? More than one, exactly. So they modify usually a root or a base word. Any other questions? Thank you very much.